Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to pull up my PowerPoint slides. Okay, so we're going to be talking about validating and reframing negative thoughts. And some of you have heard me talk about this before, but I think it's really important on this journey. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about self-validation, and we're going to be talking about when those negative thoughts pop up, what can you do to navigate that? And then I've created a little bit of a brief hypnosis activity I'm going to walk everyone through later this morning. I'll audio record that as well. So if it resonates with you, you'll have a copy. I'm going to apologize. I have been sick all week. And so if I pause, it is just to blow my nose and mute myself so you do not have to see that. And so let's dive in now. Some of you have heard me talk about this, but self-validation goes a long way. And you might be thinking it's really hard for me to do that, or when I do that, I don't necessarily believe it. That's okay. When you name your emotions, you can then validate based on that experience. And the first step to shifting from a more critical voice to a validating voice is simply naming how you first feel. Often we're so busy pushing down our emotions, especially on this journey where you have to make a lot of decisions, or you're finding yourself needing to kind of push forward. We push a lot down and don't really say much. So if you find yourself feeling disappointed, if you find yourself feeling frustrated, if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed, it's okay to name that, because once you do, and we're going to learn how to do this today, you can then validate based on that experience. This is really challenging, and we'll talk about this a little bit. And again, today's kind of our introduction to this. And so if you're interested in more of this, we can always talk about more of this in a master class or one-on-one and in the Mighty Networks group. But comparing to others is a really challenging thing. We see things on social media. We hear our friends talking about their experiences, people at work, people around us. Your feelings matter no matter what. It's very easy to compare. It's very easy to invalidate by saying, well, this person has it worse, or, I should be grateful because of X, Y, and Z. Your feelings are valid no matter what, because they're a part of your experience. We can't change what your experience is versus someone else. And that doesn't mean that because your experience is different, that makes it less important or less valid. So as we go through today and we talk about how to self-validate, the statement that I always like to use, and I always talk about this as kind of like Mad Libs, is it makes sense that you feel blank because of blank. So it makes sense that you feel disappointed because of insert the reason. When we start to shift to that, and this doesn't happen overnight, I still find myself working on this, but when we start to shift to that, we start to build up that compassionate voice towards ourselves. Most of us would say to ourselves, I could definitely see myself saying this to a friend, to a loved one, to my partner. But often we're really struggling to say that to ourselves. And why do we need that? Because that's going to build up our self-compassion that we have towards ourselves. And so many of you have heard me talk about this, but really where this comes from is internal family systems, or parts theory. And the idea with parts theory is that we're all made up of different parts. And I don't want anyone to leave here thinking like she's trying to say that we have multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder. That's not it at all. But I get where it might sound a little bit like that. We all have different parts, and these parts develop in response to stressful, traumatic, challenging life experiences, experiences where maybe we felt helpless or out of control. So you might have had a part of you that developed in childhood that learned just to follow the rules because following the rules kept you safe. Or you might have developed a part in childhood that was really anxious. And so it made you like a little bit of a people pleaser. You really focused on being able to get on time to places, do things that you were asked without any discussion of it, whatever that might be. That's how we survived those experiences. So a new part of our personality formed to cope with that situation. You developed a part of yourself. When that part forms, it stops growing because it has a role, it has a job, it doesn't really evolve. As we evolve, the idea with parts theory or internal family systems is that new parts of us develop, and those parts are what are developments of our personality. So you still have that part of you inside that might be a little bit more on edge or anxious about things. Or you might have that part of you that is really focused on not having boundaries, because when you have boundaries, it made you feel a certain type of way. Or not having boundaries allowed you to be supportive to others, and that gave you the positive feedback you were looking for. Whatever it might be, this is how the brain starts to internalize. That being said, we might say to ourselves now, well, how do I get rid of those parts? They're not really serving me anymore. And that's a totally valid and fair question, because when they don't serve us anymore, we start to get a little bit frustrated by those parts. We say to ourselves, I don't really want this anymore. This isn't really working for me. Whatever we say about it. So what we do is we have to start to talk to those parts to let go of them, because there's really no such thing as a bad part. I look at parts as strengths that are dialed up a little bit too high when we find that they're no longer serving us, because they have attributes that we like and we don't like, but they helped us to survive a certain part of our life. And it may be that when we find we're frustrated by those parts or they're no longer serving us, in fact, what's happening is that part is just not needed in that way anymore. So the part of us that learned to be really quiet and complacent to get through childhood, we may not need that anymore when we're in a high power executive position. That part of us that was really anxious and worried about being on time or being perfect, recognizing in adulthood that's just not realistic and wanting to let go of that. Again, strengths that are dialed up too high. And so there are ways that we can start to validate those parts and allow them to take a little bit of a step back so newer parts that are better serving us in this moment can step forward. So you can think of parts as like an internal team. Each part has its role and it keeps our stuff together. So each part has its own feelings, needs, belief system, and a unique way of helping us keep ourselves together. So when we're feeling distress, according to internal family systems, typically two parts or more are in conflict. So if you find yourself saying, well, I know this, but I also know that a part of me feels this way, or I'm feeling this way, but I'm also feeling this way about something. That's very normal and valid. We're allowed to experience dialectics, and it shouldn't be distressing. But what happens is that dialectic becomes distressing because we live in a society that wants to oversimplify our thoughts. We are taught that we should feel one way in a situation, not multiple ways. So one of the reasons that doing some parts work to build up that validating voice, that sense of self-compassion, is that those parts tend to soften in their beliefs and likes and dislikes when we validate them, just like people do. When we validate others, they feel good and we start to soften as well. So how do you start to do this? Notice when that part comes up. And we're going to talk about an activity you can try to do this later on. Instead of trying to silence that part or mute it, check in with it. You can notice what that part is feeling, what's coming up for it in its body. Things you don't want to do. Ignore it, judge it, mute it, or shame it. Some things we do want to do. Check in with it daily. You could do some journaling in the morning. You could do a brief meditation. You could say things like, I know that we're here to work together. Or I just want you to know I'm here for you. You might also say something like, I'm committed to helping heal you. Whatever your affirmation is towards your part, write it down, post it somewhere, say it consistently, because that's going to start just like any affirmation would to help to validate those parts. Again, like I mentioned before, when we start to stuff these things down, when we start to ignore them, that's when they start to bubble up. And then our parts don't feel supported, they don't feel cared for, and they start to shut down, and they come out at the most inopportune times. So if a part of us is feeling really worried or stressed, but doesn't feel like we're communicating with it, we're validating it, we're just pushing it down to get through the day, that's going to start to bubble up in different situations. So situations where you might not normally feel anxious, or you might find yourself feeling typically fairly calm, you might notice all of a sudden getting a little bit of anxiety, or you might notice a tension in the body. These are our parts speaking up when they feel that they're not being heard. So again, this highlights that all of our parts are valid, even if maybe we're saying to ourselves, you know what, I don't really want to have an anxious part if it was up to me. If we look at all our parts, all of them have some sort of benefit. It's just understanding the benefit and learning how to balance that. So how do we start to challenge the negative beliefs that might come up based on these different parts? There's a couple ways to do that. I like to write down all of the negative thoughts that come up for me. Why? Because first, we know externalizing is really helpful. There's research around externalizing that notes just saying something aloud or writing it down already starts to eliminate some of that negative self-talk. So you might try thinking, when you write down whatever the negative belief is, what's a more helpful thought? What's the counteractive thought? So if the belief is, I'm too old to get pregnant, what's the more helpful thought? The more helpful thought is, my team hasn't said that to me. And that's a larger view that came from years and years and years ago, when we had no research or evidence of all of the women getting pregnant into their 40s and 50s. You might use the question of, what's another possibility? So rather than feeling like I'm not going to be able to do this, or this cycle is not going to work, think about another possibility. Well, my doctor said this cycle may not work. However, we have plan A, B, and C to help get me pregnant. Another way that you can challenge a negative belief, this is personally one of my favorites. What would those who care about me say? Because often it's a lot easier for me to validate my friends and family than it is to validate myself. So if I ask myself, what would my best friend say? We all know what our best friends typically would say. What would a sibling say? What would a close friend say? What's the worst that could happen? Now, sometimes this is easier said than done, but when we ultimately go down the rabbit hole, if we say, okay, this cycle doesn't work, what's the worst that could happen? Often we'll go down this cycle, and really the worst that could happen is we do another cycle. Or we might say to ourselves, well, what happens if I meet with this new doctor and I don't like them? What's the worst that could happen? I reach back out to this community and I get some really great referrals for other doctors because I really trust this group. So you see how you can start to use these as ways to directly start to challenge that little voice that starts to pop up off the bat. Am I 100% sure this is true? Often when we have negative beliefs, they're not grounded in reality or truth. So if we think about the truthfulness, often we can say to ourselves, no, these are not entirely true. What's the best possible outcome? We never think about the best possible outcome. What would it be like if there was a negative belief and then the response was, well, the best possible outcome is that I get pregnant, or the best possible outcome is we have a really good plan moving forward, or the best possible outcome is my doctor knows exactly what to do. And then if the worst did happen, what could I do to deal with it? Who could help me? I think sometimes we let our negative beliefs just ruminate and sit with us. We just think, oh, this is the worst thing that could happen. Rather than saying, okay, well, if it is, then what would I do? Who do I have to support me right now? What tools or strategies could I use? And sometimes just naming that, writing it down, naming it aloud, naming what we know to be true, what we have access to, what we know about, and that can be helpful and healing enough to get us through to the other side and be able to work through those negative beliefs. So we talked about this a little bit last week, but I think it's important to bring it up again for those of you who haven't listened to the call or weren't able to try it out. And feel free, if you want to try one out, you can put it in the chat if you're comfortable. But how do we start to clear out those blocking beliefs or those negative beliefs? And you're going to pick that topic you want to clear the belief around. So whatever that invalidating part is coming up right now for you, I want to clear limiting beliefs around a past miscarriage, or beliefs around my age and becoming pregnant, or this past trauma that makes me fear being a mother, whatever it might be. And then you're going to write down all those negative, invalidating parts that come up. This isn't going to happen for me. I'm too old. Things don't work out. The most negative beliefs that often come up. So those little thoughts that pop up in your head regularly. Then thank those beliefs for how they've protected you. Now, this aligns with parts theory, because in parts theory, what you do is you identify all your parts and then you thank them, like we talked about before, for what they've done, and you work to allow them to soften, saying you don't always need them. You don't always need them to be there. You appreciate what you're doing, what they've done for you, but you have some other parts that can help out as well. So we can do this with our beliefs that come up around some of these more difficult topics. I thank these beliefs for protecting me when I needed that type of protection. Or I thank these beliefs for getting me through a certain time in my life and getting me to this new stage. And then you can forgive yourself for whatever that negativity is, for thinking that I'm unworthy or judging myself for things outside of my control. And then again, to our initial point, giving yourself permission to validate those beliefs and then let go of them. Knowing that we don't need to just push them down or ignore them. We can validate that it makes sense that we felt that way and that now we're moving forward. So, how do we explore these beliefs? This is kind of the chart that I like to use. I'm writing down whatever the topic is and then whatever the negative belief was that came up for me. So maybe it's my age, maybe it's about fertility specifically, maybe it's about finances, because let's be honest, this journey is expensive. And so then what's the negative belief that typically comes up for me? And then we're going to shift it to a positive affirmation instead. So take a look at this chart and see which one resonates for you. So with age, I hear this all the time, and I think that many doctors unfortunately perpetuate this at times. People in our family inadvertently, but this belief of being too old to have a child. Here's my positive affirmation. I'm in a place of emotional prosperity and I have so much to give a child in this moment and ahead. And I think about this often because I would not have been ready to have a child when I was younger. And so actually, while people might say I'm too old, this is actually the perfect time for me. When it comes to the fertility journey, I'm not where I want to be or where I think I should be on my journey. That positive affirmation, I'm resilient and continue to persevere as I move forward. And the finance one, this journey is expensive and stressful. My positive affirmation here, I'm tuned to the frequency of wealth in many aspects and know I can provide for what I need. And so what you start to do is any of those negative beliefs, we're going to work through validating them, but I also want you to think about that positive affirmation that helps to challenge that negative beliefs that comes up. So how do we start to self-validate so that we really believe those positive affirmations? Well, we know that saying positive affirmations over time, we really start to buy into them and we really start to feel them. But there are other ways we can start to also do this as well. So this is my 6-step process to self-validating. You're going to write out the scene. So when you notice an invalidating thought coming up, like, this isn't going to happen for me, Write where you were and what you were doing. Maybe you were at a doctor's appointment. Maybe you were just at work and it popped up for you, whatever it might be. Then you're going to allow your part to talk. The part of you that feels this way, let it say all of its thoughts, its feelings, whatever negative beliefs it has, really let it say everything. Then you're going to mirror that part. And so I gave you the sentence to use exactly. I understand that you feel perhaps frustrated, disappointed, hopeless in this moment, and that you want to give up, or that you just want to be pregnant and not have to do this anymore, whatever that might be. Then you're going to validate. Let your part know, whatever that part was, that it makes sense to you by validating it. So you're going to fill in this blank also like a Mad Lib. It makes sense that you would feel that way because, and then why does it make sense to you? It makes sense that you would feel that way because you've been on this journey and you've experienced a lot of heartache. And people have told you some things that have really hurt you. Even if they aren't true, they've still had an impact on you. And then you're going to best friend your part. And sometimes I'll call this big sistering. Sometimes I'll call this therapisting, therapizing, whatever you want to call it. But it's how you would talk to someone else who lacked your maturity. So someone else that you're supporting. And I think this is even really good practice in becoming the mothers that each of you is meant to be. Start by reiterating those parts' feelings. So you're going to repeat, I understand that you feel this way and you want to do this. And it makes sense that you would feel this way. So you're repeating the parts' feelings and you're offering validation. Then you're going to reason with that part to identify an alternative method or compromise for getting their needs met, avoiding shaming, blaming, criticizing, or judging, like we mentioned before. So you might say something like, I understand that you feel frustrated and disappointed and that you just want to give up. And it makes sense because this journey has been really hard and you've really persevered and pushed through. And you have an entire team when you're working with Amy behind you that you can ask questions to, get support and validation. You've become great at advocating for yourself. You're reframing these negative beliefs. And all of these things are starting to heal your body and mind to get you towards becoming and staying pregnant. And then you'll do a body scan. Scan your body and just notice any shifts. And what you should notice is there's going to be less tension in the body once you've gone through this process because those parts feel seen and heard. So what we're also doing is we're doing something we really need to do for our body, which is deactivating that cortisol response that most of us typically live in, where regularly we're feeling like there's some sort of danger or there's some sort of problem. We're deactivating that and we're teaching our bodies that we don't always need to go into that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. We don't always need to find ourselves having this heightened response. We can actually relax and say, okay, I'm safe. I'm okay. We're going to get through this. So why is this so important? Well, we can really manifest our thoughts into reality when we allow ourselves to let go of negative beliefs. There's research around this. The law of perpetual transmutation of energy states that every person has the power to change the condition of their lives by using choice. Free will is really crucial to how we want to live our lives, and it's a huge factor as we continue to work on shifting from a limitation mindset to an abundance mindset. So, like I mentioned before, we're going to take the beliefs and reframe them to positive affirming ones. So remember, we said what our beliefs were around age, fertility, finances. You're going to come up with those positive affirmations. Steal mine from here. Use some that we have in the Mighty Networks group. Take some from the internet that resonate with you, but put them somewhere you can see them. And use them as daily affirmations and mantras. As your parts come up, and share those negative beliefs, you can actually go into saying to yourself, I hear you, and repeating that positive affirmations that is kind of your counter statement to that part. And the more the part starts to hear these other parts of you saying these positive statements, the better it's going to feel. And so then again, shifting from those limitations or that scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, we're going to engage in some gratitude activities so that we also start to say to our parts, we're not going to just ruminate on these. Now, I will say, if you've heard me speak before, you do not have to feel grateful all the time. You can shift from a negativity bias to a positivity bias from many different ways. I love mindful savoring as a first step because sometimes it's hard to feel gratitude. And I look at mindful savoring as being your own hype woman. So essentially, it's thinking about what's something you did well today? What's something you feel grateful for today? What's something that happened that went well today? I'll even hype myself up if, like, I drove to work and there was less traffic than normal. Like, it's a great morning because I didn't hit all this traffic. Or if, like, my breakfast that I made for myself was particularly good that morning. Sometimes I'll remind myself that when I made the bed that morning, it looks like I'm staying in the Ritz-Carlton. Now, is that a little exaggerated? For sure. However, it's boosting those positive chemicals in the brain to make us feel really good. And the more we can do that, the better we feel. Because more times than not, what often happens is the brain is geared towards the negative. There's some research around this, but ultimately, our brain is geared towards the negative because it still feels like that's a way to help us remain hypervigilant and protect ourselves. Now, hopefully, we're not in any sort of ongoing war or in a state of crisis or unsafety day to day, but that is how our brain functions. It is that we're genetically predisposed. This is something that's evolutionary been passed down. So we need to engage in more positive self-talk to shift that thought so that we can also reduce those stress hormones taking over our body every day. So even if you try this once or twice a day, you're really looking to build up that feeling. We also want to focus on pursuing passions. I often look at this as we're teaching our future spirit babies that we want them to do things that bring them joy. So what are your passions or your hobbies that you have been maybe overlooking or not focusing as much on? Because let's be honest, fertility can be a full-time, if not more than full-time job. What are hobbies or interests that you've wanted to learn or explore that you haven't been able to do before? Feeling passionate and excited about all that allows us to move towards this space of manifesting, this abundance mindset, thinking about all the things that we are capable and able to achieve. And when we start to get into that positive mindset, we again start to get into this validating voice of challenging those negative beliefs when we start to shift those thoughts. And so when we start to shift away from what we want to achieve and nourish ourselves by following what's resonating in our hearts, we build up that kindness, that self-compassion, and those other parts that may not be serving us right now start to again soften and take a pause. Visualizing is a great way to do this as well. We can manifest abundance through visualizing. We have some tools in this program that you can use, but use it with the affirmations that you create yourself by shifting your own negative beliefs to a positive or something more motivating. Try and visualize this. Close your eyes and just think about the life you're living when you achieve the thing that you want. See what it looks like, see if there's an image or a picture. The beautiful thing about visualization is it could be as simple as like an image that represents something and you know exactly what it means. And then you're going to think about drawing this, recording this, writing it out. Maybe even sometimes I'll have clients choose like an image from the internet that represents that. But visualizing is really part of your own experience. You don't even need to listen to a guided meditation. Think about what you'll be doing, what you'll be wearing when you achieve this. Get really specific. Who will be around you? What do you envision will be around you in your life in that moment? But by really getting those vivid details, and this is often why hypnosis works really well, by getting those really vivid details, you're able to start to shift into more of that abundance mindset by focusing on the things that you want to manifest versus maybe those negative beliefs that certain parts are bringing up for you. Part of shifting from that negative self-talk to more of this self-validating voice is by setting boundaries, because we also know that we can bring these up for ourselves, but there are external factors that impact our overall sense of well-being. There's a quote I love that says, we're the sum of the 5 closest people around us. And I'll often ask clients who those people are and what their mindsets typically are. If we're around our negative boss every day, that plays a role in how we feel about ourselves. If we have a close friend who engages in a lot of negative self-talk, that also rubs off on us. When we think about boundaries, notice what's happening in your body. Try a body scan like we did before. When someone comes to you and wants to talk about something, when you're dealing with something that's challenging or difficult, ask yourself if you're in the space to take this on. Ask yourself what you're feeling. Check in with yourself and notice if the emotions you're feeling, if there's tension or stress or frustration, are they yours or someone else's? Often, many of us don't even realize that we're taking on the emotions of others, and this is impacting our overall sense of self. If this is impacting us, we need to check in before accepting another request, because we want to make sure that our bodies and our minds are in a state where we're giving self-compassion, we're not feeling overwhelmed or overly stressed. I often check in about boundary traps as well. If someone asks us for something and we start to think, I need to help, or I should do this, or it'll be mean if I say no, or I wouldn't be a good friend if I said no, that to me is a sign that you're not in a space to take that on, because our self-care always comes first. And there are times, and this is really hard because society did not train us to be this way, and most of us are not this way. There are times where it's very easy to say, yep, let me just help briefly, and then it turns into something larger. Or we don't really know what we're taking on, and then it can become triggering to us in some ways. By taking care of yourself first and having compassion towards yourself, you're teaching this to others. You're actually implementing skills and giving them the honor of also setting their own boundaries. When we make requests of others and respect their boundaries, we're also modeling this. There's a beauty to saying no when we or others need to do so. Modeling this for people around us, allowing others to do this as well, that's really, really helpful. How do we also set boundaries? Schedule a wellness check for yourself. We talked about checking in with our parts each day. You can do these both at the same time. If you're noticing that your parts are really in a negative headspace, that to me is an indicator that we can't really take on anything else today. Think about it as if you were your own best friend and you checked in and this is how your friend said they were feeling, what would you do about it? In setting boundaries, we're creating more space to start to self-validate, and we're building up that self-compassion and kindness. So when we start to think about how to validate ourselves, we have an easier time doing so because our bandwidth is greater to be able to do this. Amidst this, we can think about how do we nourish ourselves to really build up that validating voice. You are worthy. You're worthy of setting boundaries, of setting limits when you don't feel like you can handle something in the moment. When we strengthen our self-worth and build up that validating voice, it comes from physical and emotional nourishment. Typically, when we need something to support our emotional well-being, our body sends signals to let us know. The body is very interconnected with the mind. However, often we're on autopilot, or we're working so hard that we're not really cued to those signals. So this kind of wellness check-in is really, really important, because when we start to honor our needs, when we listen to our body, we start to shift to that abundance mindset as well. And so the more we focus on ways in which to focus on the positives that we have right now, the curiosities that we have about ourselves, activities that bring us energy and joy, the more we shift and really buy into that abundance mindset that starts by just noting the positive affirmations that resonate with us, even if we feel like we can't totally take those in yet. So again, you can see this is a process, and it's okay to take a step away. This is really hard. Some days I recognize that these activities or recommendations may not work for you. That's okay and normal. There are going to be hard days. This is a really hard journey. Life is a hard journey. Things pop up, experiences happen, and there are just some days where we feel like we just need to shut down a little bit. Avoid situations where you might feel triggered in those moments. Social media, engaging in a group text where you might find that someone is talking about something that triggers you. When you can't reframe, when you can't validate that part of you that's feeling negative and reframe it, allow yourself to feel it and just sit with it. Then do some sort of grounding exercise to pull you back to the present. Whether it's doing, a grounding exercise like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or rainbow grounding and naming something that's every color in the room, petting one of your pets, getting outside and just grounding yourself in nature, whatever it might be. That's the most important thing in those moments. The antidote to comparisons are gratitude. So find what makes you feel good and lean into that on those tough days. And it doesn't have to be you're sitting there and naming all the things you're grateful for. It can be as simple as saying, on this day, when I'm feeling this way, I need to have this food because it really makes me feel good. Or I need to listen to this type of music because it really makes me feel good. If you're like, well, Sam, I really need to get on social on those days, use social media like you would Amazon, knowing you can bring in feelings and experiences, not just packages with Prime. So think about how you consume that and how you stagger it or separate it so that you can engage in the content you want to without going to spaces where you know you're going to be more triggered. So I think one of the greatest ways to start to work on reframing is to get into the subconscious a little bit. So I've created a little hypnosis exercise for us to do today that focuses in on self-validation and building up that validating voice. So we're going to try this today. I'm going to audio record it as well, so you don't have to go through this whole thing to listen to it. So what you can do to try this right now in this moment is just find a comfortable spot wherever you are. You can put a blanket on, get nice and cozy, get a pillow if you like, and you're going to close your eyes. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You're going to take in whatever you want to take in. Unlike meditation, I'm not going to tell you to bring your thoughts back. Your thoughts may wander, and in fact, they likely will wander, and this is normal. What it does is it tells us that your subconscious is doing the work we want it to do. Because ultimately, we're not interested in conscious thought changing. We're changing the subconscious. We're changing the parts of our brain that learned years and years and years ago when we were little that certain things were triggering to us, or we needed to behave in certain ways to protect ourselves. And we're going back to the subconscious that remembers everything that's happened to us. And we're saying to ourselves, subconscious, I appreciate you. And we need to start to shift how we view or understand that part of ourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and get nice and comfortable. Again, get a pillow, a blanket, whatever you feel like you need. And I'm going to blow my nose one more time so that no one has to hear that. And we'll go ahead and get started. And so I'd like you each to take a nice deep breath in through your nose and gently let it out. And then another nice deep breath in through the nose and back out. Feel your body supported by the chair, the couch, the floor, the bed beneath you, wherever you might be. There's nothing you need to do right now. Nowhere to go. Nowhere you need to be. Just let go. And as you breathe, you notice your shoulders soften, your jaw loosens, your belly relaxes. Allow your breath to move gently in and out, like waves on the shore. Steady, predictable, safe. Let your thoughts float in and out without holding on to them. There are clouds passing, and you are the sky, vast, open, and calm. Now I'd like you to imagine yourself standing near a quiet river. The water flows gently, steady, always moving forward. And you notice in your hands that you're holding a bundle of old beliefs. Beliefs that were never truly yours or that no longer serve you. Maybe some sound like, I've waited too long. Something must be wrong with me. I can't trust my body. I'm not enough. My body isn't doing what it's supposed to. These thoughts feel heavy. They've been with you too long. And now it's time to let them go. One by one, you gently place them into the river, written on leaves or stones or petals. The water takes them, carries them downstream, out of your body, out of your mind, away. You are not your thoughts. You are not your doubts. You are the observer, the healer, the soul. Let yourself feel the lightness now as that weight begins to lift. And as the river flows on, you walk slowly past it and into a soft garden. You carry a small pouch of new seeds, each one a more loving belief, a more compassionate truth. You kneel beside the soil, warm, rich, ready. One by one, you plant these new beliefs. I'm doing the best I can. My body is worthy of love and trust. I'm not broken, I'm becoming. The path is mine to walk, and I'm strong enough. I'm still whole, even in my waiting. It's safe to hope again. You cover each seed gently. You water them with grace. You offer sunlight in the form of gentle breath. These beliefs will grow within you. They're a part of you now. You don't have to be perfect. You only have to be kind with your words, with your thoughts, with your presence. Now imagine a path in your mind. It's a trail that you've walked many times. The one of fear, of blame, of frustration. And now you see a new path beside it. Gentler, softer, unfamiliar, but calling to you. And this is the path of validating self-talk. You step onto it and you say to yourself, this journey is part of my story, not the whole story. It's okay to feel pain and to feel hope. I give myself permission to rest, grieve, and believe again. My body has carried me through every day, and that is a miracle already. And as you walk this new path, the old trail fades just a little, and the new one becomes stronger each time you speak gently to yourself. And let these affirmations soak in like water into fertile soil. You don't need to try to believe them. Just let them land softly in your subconscious, knowing the subconscious is going to take these in more and more. I'm allowed to feel what I feel. I choose to speak kindly to myself. I'm healing even when I don't see it yet. My timeline is my own. I'm preparing the soil for what is to come. I'm already enough. Let these words echo inside you, becoming truths, becoming companions, becoming your new inner voice. And soon you'll begin to return to your day, bringing with you something new, a softness, a steadiness, a subtle shift in how you speak to yourself. Take a nice deep breath in through your nose and then let it out slowly, whatever way feels right for you. Begin to feel your body again, the support beneath you, the air around you. Wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes. You're not behind. You're not broken. You are becoming, and your voice is turning toward love. And gently open your eyes when you're ready and take another nice deep breath in through your nose and back out through your mouth, returning to the present moment. And give yourself a moment to come back to the present. Take a drink if you need. I'll give everyone a moment to return. And so what's your homework for this week? For me, try out self-validating at least once per day this week. You can even do this before bed, which is actually really helpful if you're someone who struggles with those ruminating thoughts before bed of what could have been different that day or what you need to do tomorrow or what you should be doing. You can also do this throughout the day when situations pop up where you notice that you start to shame or blame yourself or that negative voice starts to take over. And this self-validation can be really quick. Again, you're acknowledging what you feel. You're validating that. It makes sense that you feel that way. And if you want, and this is not even part of your homework, but if you want to go above and beyond, then you can start to reframe that through our big sistering or best friending technique. And I think it's important to name this always. This journey is really hard. I think it's really important to honor and praise yourself for being here, for trying out these strategies, for allowing myself, Amy, Sarah, Carrie, Heather, whomever you're working with to be a part of this journey. So be kind to yourself, love yourself, be patient, and amazing things will happen. Please reach out if you need anything. I'm really excited to see you all next week. I'll stay here for a few moments if anyone has a question that they'd like me to answer. But again, thank you all so much for being here, for bearing with me this week through illness. And I will see you all on Thursday for our next time together.